we've had apparently 95 people sign up, so it's going to be quite a big webinar, I think. So do bear with us a little bit on the questions. We might not be able to answer everything, but we'll try and cover the main areas. So my role at EST is I'm the project manager for Energy Redress, and the aim of this webinar really is to provide you with some tips and guidance on how to do a good application. We've run 3 rounds now, so we've kind of got feedback on some of the pitfalls that we can help you out with, as well as obviously the Q&A opportunity. And part of the reason again is that actually Redress has turned out to be a very competitive grant scheme, as we expected. We've always been very oversubscribed in all the rounds so far. The biggest round we had 75 applications and gave 15 grants, just to kind of give you some context there. So we want to try and help you do the best application that you can. You won't hear a huge amount from me today. I'm going to hand over to Katie Revel and Graham Bolton, who are our development officers. So they will be your main point of contact for anyone who's applying to Energy Redress, and also for our grantees. We brought them in because we wanted that kind of critical friend role. We want we want you to be able to talk to somebody who knows a bit about the kinds of things that you're trying to do, understands, and is passionate about that stuff as well. So they will be the people, if you're successful in your grant application, they'll be the people that you report to as well. So they're going to kind of take you through the scheme. We do also draw on expertise from elsewhere across EST, and we have an external panel of experts who make the final decision. One other point to say, I guess, about Energy Redress is that throughout this, our guiding principle in developing the scheme has been to try to get the maximum positive impact for the money that's available. We all know there's a huge amount of work that needs doing, and there is never going to be enough money coming through Redress to solve all of that. So I guess have that in mind. We've tried all the way through, and we were coming up with the scheme guidance and the rules to kind of guide it towards how can we make that money have the most kind of positive change in people's lives and positive impact. So the more that you can tell us about, kind of give us credible projects that will do that, the better. So with that, I will hand you over to Graham Bolton, who's going to take you through the first part of the presentation.
Thank you, Graham, and good morning, everybody. As Graham said, my name's Graham Bolton. I'm one of the 2 development officers. I'm based up in Scotland. I look after the Scottish projects and some in the north of England. So I'm going to take you through just a quick introduction to the Energy Industry Voluntary Redress Scheme. The voluntary redress scheme has been created because in the past, redress payments where Ofgem regulated companies may have breached rules and are making payments as part of a settlement deal. They, in the past, have tended to support their own sort of charities and organisations to provide support, but Ofgem have changed that mainly to enable charities such as yourselves to be able to apply for funding. And it's a good way also to make sure that funding quickly and directly reaches vulnerable consumers or those who have been impacted by any rule breaches that have resulted in a redress payment. The amount of funding will vary throughout the year. We don't even know how much money will be in the sort of next or subsequent rounds until payments are received. So when you are doing projects, please consider that, because if, for example, we have a total pot of £500,000 and your project is asking for up to or even more than 50% of that project, it may not be successful just because, as Graham said, it's quite a competitive process. So you may need to consider improving your value for money, for example, through match funding or the size of your project, or adjusting the size of your project. Also, there are 4 rounds each year so we review the amount of funding available on a quarterly basis as per the dates there. The scheme is open to charitable organisations, and I put in bold there that support energy consumers. So we do like to look for an energy focus with projects because this is an energy redress fund. and that is for people and organisations based in England, Scotland and Wales. Two priorities of the scheme. The first one is supporting energy consumers, in particular energy consumers in vulnerable situations, and if you want an example of what vulnerable consumer is, our guidance document has a link to Ofgem's vulnerability strategy. So these are customers who are less than able to protect or represent their interests in the energy market, or who are more likely to be impacted or suffer detriment as part of something that's occurred. There are potential for fund-specific priorities depending on the cause of a redress payment. We haven't had any yet, but one of the aims of the redress scheme is to offset any impact that for example, a supplier has had on consumers. So there could be, so keep an eye out for fund-specific options in the future. Another part of the fund, and this represents about 15% of each, up to 15% of each round spend, is innovation. So testing, trialing the rollout of products or services, or conducting research or analysis, etc., into development products or services, again, that will support energy consumers. We've got, and again, our guidance document outlines what we're looking for in terms of supporting energy consumers and innovation. So the types of support that is available, we will fund capital or revenue funding up to 100% of your project costs. That can include things such as training costs as well, so sending staff members on training courses. The projects can last up to 2 years. We have a minimum threshold of £20,000. Please make sure your project is greater than £20,000. If it's not, it won't be eligible and we will not assess it. Maximum grant depends on the size of the fund available. For round 4, which is currently open, we have chosen to, in partnership with Ofgem, to cap that amount, which is £100,000. Grants are paid quarterly in arrears, and they're only paid on the submission of evidence of delivery. So if you can't evidence, for example, through invoices or through records of staff time, etc., you won't receive your funding until we're satisfied. So think carefully when you're putting in an application how you will record and evidence your project delivery. Funds can pay for anything from sort of home energy efficiency improvements to providing advice. Again, our guidance document has a good list of examples of what can and can't be funded, so please consult that. A key part of redress is the fact that it cannot fund any activity that will benefit Ofgem energy companies in any way. So these are companies that hold a license, so a supply license, a generation transmission license, etc. With Ofgem, that's because money has usually come as a result of a supplier, for example, breaching their license condition. Therefore, any money or benefits can't find their way back or be passed back to that license company. As well as any direct financial benefit, that includes things like positive publicity, reduced marketing costs, or offsetting the delivery of their obligations. So they are licensed, so suppliers are licensed to deliver things such as eco. So redress money can't be used for top-up grants for eco measures or measures that allow and enable access to eco for specific funders, or sort of referral pathways into things such as eco, warm home discount, or priority service registers. This is to ensure that redress isn't open to any abuse from suppliers, so using redress money to offset the cost of them having to deliver their obligations. Customers are allowed to be with things such as warm home discount and priority services register. In your advice, you are allowed to make customers aware of that if their supplier does run them, and that they need to they can contact their supplier, but you shouldn't be doing the referrals for them. Moving on, we have a very good website, energyredress.org.uk, and I will just show you around that. So this is where you'll find all information about the scheme. in terms of eligibility and buttons to click on as well for applications. If you do wish to apply for funding, you can click on our Apply for Funding tab, and that takes you through where you can register, and also more details about applying for funding as well, and that will link to our application pack. So we have application forms, although these should be submitted online. This is just an example. There's also budget tables that you can submit and a link to our guidance document, which looks like this. So that is always kept up to date and is always available via the application process part of our website. A good thing to consider when you are doing applications is we have produced a feedback document with some tips. And if you click on this link here, that will take you to our feedback document. So that's got good things to consider when you're writing your project. And we also have an announcement section as well. So it's good to have this in your favorites, because this is where we announce details such as the webinar or projects that have been successful, or pots of money, etc. So that's always a good thing to keep. And finally, we have a map of other projects as well in your area. So you can click on the little icons and that will show you what project is operating where. Okay. The one piece of advice I would like everyone to take away from today is please read our guidance document. We've worked very hard on putting that together. We think it contains everything you should need to do a good application. We are part of the assessment team that looks at applications, and if we believe that an application hasn't, the person clearly hasn't read through our guidance, that will result in a poor score, and they're unlikely to be shortlisted for funding. So that will include things such as non-applicable costs or non-applicable activities being included as part of applications. If you do have any questions about the guidance document that you feel it doesn't answer, please contact Katie or myself, or we do have a Redress mailbox as well, and the email addresses for that are on the last slide of this presentation. So the application process. So to apply for energy redress, the first thing you need to do is register your organisation. I'm aware some of you may have already done this, but this is just for new people. And there is a register tab in the far corner in orange text, so you can click on that, and that will take you through to an application form, which looks like this. And this is where we ask you to just submit information about your organisation, and just some further things about sort of projects and data protection, etc. Once you've submitted all your pre-assessment information, we will take a look at your organisation, your activities. Are they energy related? We'll check for any possible links to licensed energy companies. We'll also do a finance check as well. So we'll look on stuff such as the Charities Register's website for your latest sets of accounts. And just ask any other questions. So we may come back to you at that stage, just saying, could you send us the latest set of accounts or more details about what your organisation does? If you do pass that stage, then you will be provided with access to our charity dashboard. So this is our portal. This is just an example my colleague Katie has put together. So these are all made up. One thing is before you do an application, if you can click on this sort of pinky purpley box, apply for funding, and then do your application, that's the process you need to follow. And that's where you submit your applications for funding. So you need to complete your application form, your budget table, and make sure as part of the application process to include any project partner letters. Simply referencing somebody as a project partner isn't proof that they are part of your project, and especially if that organisation is responsible for delivering a large part of the project. If there's no letter of support, we have no confidence that they are part of your project. Once we have received all the applications and the application process is closed, applications are reviewed and scored by 2 EST members of staff. So across EST, we've got a lot of knowledge across a lot of the areas of the energy industry. So we have applications reviewed by people who are subject matter experts in the right areas. Top scoring applications, so an average is taken of the 2 scores, and then they are shortlisted for our decision panel. We do have gateway criteria as well, which Katie will talk about in her slides in terms of stuff like additionality or value for money. So some applications that score highly may fail some gateway criteria and not be shortlisted, which is a risk. Once we have got a shortlist, we send the applications to our external panel of experts. So these are experts from across the energy industry. They review the applications and discuss them and make the final decision on what gets funded. After that is done, we will notify successful projects. Unsuccessful projects will be provided with feedback, and one thing to say is please can you take on board that feedback. Simply resubmitting the same application form in each round will produce the same result. You won't be shortlisted for funding. So thanks for listening to me this morning. That is everything from my part of the presentation. So I'm going to hand you over to Katie Revel, and she's going to take you through what makes a good application.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Katie Revel. I'm the Development Officer based in the southwest of England, and hopefully this is the juicy bit. This is kind of what we're actually looking for when you put your applications together. It may seem obvious, but your project idea must meet the redress priorities regarding supporting energy consumers or the research into useful products and services. Your charity may do all sorts of wonderful things in the community or for your clients, but the project must be linked to energy issues and consumers in some way. I'd say keep the idea as straightforward as possible rather than throwing everything at it, because it makes it much easier to assess and to understand and much more likely to actually be delivered. When it comes to the beneficiaries of your project, whilst we appreciate that you may have an open door policy and help everyone who approaches you, it may help your project to stand out from the crowd if it has a more sort of clearly defined vulnerable target audience, and if you can explain how you're going to reach them and why they're vulnerable and how you're going to work with them. We do find that some applications tend to mix up objectives, outcomes and targets. We do explain these in the guidance document, and with each box in the application form, there's a bit of writing above and below that gives some hints as well. So the objectives are sort of what you will do to meet your aim, for example, launch an energy advice service, and the outcomes are the changes that occur due to your project being delivered. For example, residents have access to an energy advice service, residents learn how to manage their energy use better. When it comes to the rationale section, please remember that we may not know everything about the geographical area that you work in. So please provide some sort of background to your area, why the evidence of need for your project and why the people you want to work with are vulnerable. The same goes for your organisation. Although obviously we have Google and we can look at your websites and see what you're up to, the assessor may not know everything about your organisation, your charity, so include all the information you think they'll need to see to understand that you're the right organisation to deliver the project. It's also important regarding the rationale, is like why you think the project that you come up with will work. So if you're saying you're going to deliver a certain number of events, or you're going to do home visits or train this sort of person, why? Why do you think that that's what's going to work? Is it based on your experience? Is it based on what your clients have been telling you? Please provide some rationale for the actual mode of delivery. When completing your application form, please check for consistency across all sections. So this is especially important if your project has changed as you were developing it, or if different people have been working on the application. So if you mention something in one section, sort of events or champions or resources, please make sure they're explained elsewhere and it all sort of makes sense nicely in the application form. On to the next slide. So when it comes to targets, the targets you set should balance showing good value for money whilst being realistic about what you can achieve. we really want to see some smart or rounded target figures for the activities that you will deliver during your project. So the number of home visits, potentially, number of briefing sessions, number of events. So a lot of the assessors do have experience in delivering energy advice, and we know what's realistic or not when it comes to delivering. And if you'd like to get an idea of the sort of the scale of targets from the projects that we've funded, please read the information on our website about the 28 projects that have been funded so far. Please differentiate, if you can, between the number of households you plan to help with different levels of advice. So our assessment panel at the last round was sort of very keen to be able to distinguish between who's going to get sort of really good detailed face-to-face advice or home visits versus those who may get a leaflet through the door, reached via social media, access to a website. There is a difference between, if you can, please explain the different levels of advice you're going to offer and who's going to get what. You're going to be asked to report quarterly on your progress towards the targets you set. So remember to describe how you're going to monitor progress. So are you going to use event sign-in sheets, database? Are you going to install energy monitors in buildings or homes to prove the energy savings? Undertake customer service surveys perhaps. But as well as monitoring the progress of the project, we're really interested in how you're going to monitor the impacts of the interventions you deliver. So EST are keen to help demonstrate the value of the energy advice sector. And so if possible, we want redress projects to not only show sort of the financial and energy saving impacts that they lead to, but also the health and well-being impacts of the projects. And the feedback document includes quite a few different ideas of potentially useful resources, all sorts of different ways to monitor health and well-being impacts. The monitoring of your project can be a project cost. So if you do need to buy equipment or external support to evaluate, then that can be a project cost. Next slide, please. Okay, so energy advice applications. I am going to spend a little bit of time on these as they are the majority of applications we receive are about delivering energy advice. We expect to see those delivering face-to-face energy advice have some level of qualification in the topic and potentially other sort of qualifications and skills as well. So we're talking about qualifications. We're kind of looking for the City and Guilds level 3 in energy awareness or equivalent, because that we know that that gives a really good sort of grounding in energy advice and home energy issues. Training costs can be included in applications. And obviously helping people get qualifications and develop their skills provides legacy to the project and an added sort of feather in your cap that you have trained energy advisors in your charity. If you're going to be helping very vulnerable households, please consider how best to deliver the advice. For example, it may be best to offer home visits or to go to them rather than expect them to be able to travel to you. We also prefer the practical advice and support in making changes rather than simply disseminating leaflets, social media campaigns, at the educational side of things. All of those elements are a great part of an energy advice project, and we understand like getting leaflets and posters out is brilliant, but when it comes to the actual targets and number of people you're going to help, we're really looking for the practical advice and support that you're going to be delivering. Now, lots of projects want funds for small measures, so that might be LEDs or radiator panels, things like that. Back up. If you are going to be asking for funds for small measures, please explain what you're wanting to buy, who's going to get them, and how you will ensure they are installed safely and to a high standard. Obviously, you can give out bulbs at an event and you can have faith that people will go home and install them, but it may be best that you actually do home visits or you have your handy person or whoever it is actually install them to make sure the improvements are made and done well. When it comes to crisis funds, and I totally appreciate the need sometimes to have crisis funds to help people, perhaps with when they've got no energy and you want to top up their meter, that is okay and that is acceptable to redress, but please be clear about the eligibility criteria for those funds. You know, who's going to get what, when and why, and also what ongoing support will be provided to that person to try and stop that crisis situation happening again. It might be that you don't provide all the ongoing support, but you refer them to Debt Advice or to another organisation that will really help them. But we don't want to just read that you're going to give someone £50 to top up their electricity meter and leave them to it and think that their problems are all solved. So please do bear that in mind. Now, it's not on the slide, but if you're looking to use volunteer energy champions to increase the reach of your project, and lots of applications seem to be, please explain what training or guidance they will receive to carry out their role and how they will be supported to deliver any project outputs they are tasked with. So we quite often see, we're going to train up 20 energy champions, and then nothing more is said about what they're actually going to do or how they're going to be helped. Toolkits is another interesting one. We do have quite a lot of applications seeking funding to develop new resources, websites, databases, good practice guides, and obviously there is already a lot available out there online. Some of it is referenced in the Annex 1 of the guidance document to give you ideas. And we really don't want to see any applications that are looking to reinvent the wheel, or that are going to develop something that's going to sit on our desk collecting dust, or websites or databases that are going to go out of date as quickly as they're developed. So please check what already exists. If we've missed something in the annex that you think people should know about, or that your organisation already makes available, let us know. If you notice a gap or an unmet need, then that's great. And obviously that would be a really good use of redress funding. Be aware that resources developed with redress funding will have to be made publicly available for the benefit of the wider sector. So if you do develop a lovely new sort of way to reach a certain target audience, whether it's posters or a training package, then that may have to be made widely available as part of the redress project. Finally on this, briefings to frontline health professionals, talks to community groups, all really good ways of getting energy advice and fuel poverty issues made more aware, known of. They're often mentioned in applications. Please explain the format of these. Who's going to deliver them? What's it going to cover? What's expected of those who attend? Are they going to be going on and delivering basic energy advice to their clients? Are they going to be referring people to you? Just explain as much detail as possible, please. I appreciate there are word counts in the boxes on the application form, but the more you can tell us about what you're actually going to do, the better. So moving on, nearly there. Hold on in there, everybody. So this section of the application form was a chance to prove that you have thought through how you will actually deliver the project and that you have the right people involved to make it happen. We appreciate that sometimes you may be recruiting new people, and in these instances, you should explain the skills and experience you will look for in the new team members to help us assess your application. Your capacity to deliver the project is a gateway criteria for us. So you may have a lovely project idea, but then seemingly no experience of delivering that sort of thing. If energy is a new area you're wanting to get into, it may be that you need to get some energy expertise on board with the project, whether that is a person or working with a partner organisation, so that you really know what you're doing when it comes to reaching vulnerable energy consumers. It might be useful to know that successful redress projects are likely to receive grant offer letters and be able to start their projects about 10 weeks following the round closing. This is just due to the time it takes to assess all the applications, get them to the panel, get decisions made, get grant offer letters out. Successful projects, the start dates are a little negotiable, but it's normally at the start of the month, and then you start your quarterly monitoring process. It's also worth noting that a charity can only lead on one application per round, but can be involved in more than one. And next on to additionality. Now, additionality is a gateway criteria for redress applications, which means we really need you to conduct some basic research to determine if there are any similar services or projects operating in your area. These might be being delivered by the local council, if they're lucky enough to still have an affordable warmth scheme. It could be other charities, it could be community energy groups, it could be other advice agencies. If other schemes or services are available in your area, please acknowledge them in your application and explain how your project will interact with them for the benefit of residents. This could mean that you develop referral pathways between your projects, that you target different audiences to avoid competing with each other, or that you offer different levels of advice. We need to ensure that redress projects don't duplicate services that are already available. Now, in Scotland, the situation is slightly different in that we know that there are Home Energy Scotland advice centres covering the whole country. So please, if you're considering developing a redress project, contact your local advice centre early on, see how you can work with them, or alternatively, you can contact Faith Pashley, the Communities Officer within Home Energy Scotland. Her email is faith.pashley@est.org.uk. Now, the reason that is important is that the Home Energy Scotland service is the route into most of the Scottish Government's sort of home energy efficiency schemes for grants and loans for energy efficiency improvements. So if you're working with vulnerable people in Scotland who may be eligible for those things, then referring into Home Energy Scotland is a requirement. We would like to see that, please. Moving on, a couple more slides to go. So the risk section. This has actually been an area of weakness in many applications, and yet it's obviously an important part. It's an opportunity to demonstrate that if you have thought through the consequences of delivering your project and have a plan and policies to minimise the risks. So the risks can be things like health and safety of those involved, if you're putting in measures or going out and about, safeguarding issues if you're dealing with very vulnerable people and conducting home visits, and also risks to project delivery due to changes in circumstances. So what are you going to do if staff leave, if volunteers drop out, lack of take-up of the advice or whatever it is you're doing. There's obviously risks associated with installing measures in people's homes. So obviously please do explain quite clearly how that's going to be done and managed safely. And we need to ensure that your processes are compliant with GDPR and other data protection issues. We won't be asking you to provide us with any sensitive client information, but we may need to view this information if we're asked to audit your project. So we would come to you and have to potentially see your event sign-in sheets or your client spreadsheets. So please consider how you would collect the appropriate consent from your clients for this sort of work. The policies that you have in place to reduce the risks can be listed as mitigation measures in this risk section. So moving on to project costs. The value for money of redress projects is a gateway criteria, and it may seem really obvious, but please check that you're asking for, or what you're asking for, and the total project costs add up. So we do see projects that are asking for a certain amount, and the grant request is either less or more than that. There is a spreadsheet on our website that you can use to sort of check that all the project costs add up and look correct, but the project cost section is within the online application form. It is split into staff costs, capital costs and other costs. The costs must be associated with delivering your project, not all your general running costs, please. And it's really important that if you're including a percentage of overheads in your staff costs, that you don't then include things like rent, utilities, insurance in other costs as well. So you can add up to 25% per each member of staff towards overheads. And if you do that, we don't want to see other overheads asked for as well, please. The staff costs for all project partners should be gross salary costs. So the salary plus insurance and tax, not commercial day rates. Please be realistic about the number of working days people are going to work on your project. We don't want to see people putting down that someone's going to be working 365 days a year, which we have seen and we know is not very realistic. Where services are procured competitively, then commercial day rates can be paid. So think about which approach works best for any other organisations involved in the project, whether they're if they're going to be partners, they should charge staff costs at usual staff rates. If they are being procured, then those organisations may be charging commercial day rates. As I alluded to earlier, we really don't want to see any large unexplained pots of money in the other cost section. So if you're after a pot for small measures or an emergency fund, these should be explained elsewhere in the form so that we know what the money will be spent on and how many people will benefit from it. On to the next slide, which I think is pretty much my last one. So I'm going to read this one. Please note that we want redress funding to be given to a variety of organisations working across Great Britain. It is highly competitive, and this means that applications from the same type of charities are all competing with each other. So we get some from the very similar type of organisation in a similar area. You're all putting applications into the same round. You're all competing with each other. Could you work together in partnership somehow, put together a bigger project perhaps? We do see a lot of applications where they fail to acknowledge anything else going on in their area. If you say that you are the only organisation offering energy advice in your patch, please be sure that's true, because we can check and that doesn't go down very well. It results in a low assessment score. And as I said earlier, we want learnings to be made from the projects to be made widely available. So in the section on the application form about scope, next steps and scope for learning, it's okay to share information within your own networks, but we do want it to be shared wider than that if possible, whether it's through regional forums or national conferences or other groups and websites and things that you have, not just within your network. So I hope that's useful. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it wasn't death by PowerPoint. And now we're going to go over to Graham Ayling, who has hopefully been monitoring any questions that are coming in. And thank you for listening to me. There are our contact details.
Thanks, Katie. Just feel free to start sending your questions through, but just while you have time to do that, I was going to just add a couple of comments. Something that might be of interest to people is we are delivering this work on behalf of Ofgem, so we're kind of managing the program on behalf of Ofgem. And Ofgem are really interested in the program. That's something that's kind of come through very strongly. They've very senior people within Ofgem have come and visited some of the projects. So I think it's kind of useful to know that, because they're genuinely interested in seeing what's going on the front line. So it's another way for all of us involved with the program to be able to represent the needs of vulnerable people. So I think just a useful bit of background. A couple of extra top tips. If you aren't already registered with Redress, do try and do it early, because it's not a case of just click submit at the end of your form and you're registered. As Katie outlined, we have to do a bit of checking up on the back of that. So it does take a few days to turn around. So the earlier you can do it, the better, and then it doesn't get in the way of deadlines or anything like that. Another very basic top tip is the scheme guidance. We basically wrote as a kind of reference document. So it's really useful, we hope, to have it open next to you when you're doing your application. So a lot of the guidance is actually structured in the same way as the application form. So there's kind of a section on each section within the application form. So if you have it open next to you on on your computer desktop or in hard copy, then it means it can help you through what exactly do I put in this section. Well, how do I avoid duplicating what I've already put in that section? And you can also check on things like the eligibility. When you're doing your budgets, you can check with the rules on eligibility. In terms of future rounds, obviously there is the round that is currently open, which is 300k. In terms of future funding, as was noted in the presentation, the money comes through as and when these payments are negotiated. So we don't know very much, but we do know there is some money now in the bank ready for there to be around 5. So there will be around 5 once this round is completed. When funding is announced, it often goes out in the public domain, and you'll see things in the press. So sometimes you can pick things up from that, and we will try and keep people well informed. But yeah, we don't necessarily, well, we don't know at the start of the year how much money there's going to be in the budget, so we've had to kind of design the whole scheme around that. Just on geographical spread. So this might be something that I know it's something that a couple of people have asked me in the past. We don't currently have any kind of geographical allocation. So there's not a pot of money for Scotland and a pot of money for England and Wales, or by region or whatever. But we do want to see a good geographical spread across the country, and you can see from the successful projects we've had so far that we've got a pretty good spread. We will work on that and try and keep that going. So certainly in the short term, we may look at trying to kind of promote the scheme a bit more in areas where we haven't had many successful bids yet. We don't intend to get into geographical allocations. I guess if there was a real issue, then we might look at it in future. But I think our focus all along has been we want to fund the best projects that are going to have the most impact for the money. On the grant funds, if you are doing an application that includes grant funds out to other people, so for example, we are going to have a grant fund for small energy efficiency measures. Katie talked quite a lot about the more information you can give about that, the better. I guess the thing to bear in mind with that is we have a duty as part of our kind of due diligence to know what the money is getting spent on. So the more information you can give us, the better, and that's why we ask. And I know that sometimes you might want to kind of have a bespoke fund for individual households, but I guess the more you can tell us about what is in and out of scope for that fund, the better, just so that we can be confident that the money is being spent on things that are eligible and that makes sense. On energy advice, again, as Katie said, we're conscious there's lots and lots of organisations that are working on energy advice out there, and issuing money across everyone. So I think we're conscious that we want this money to go as far as possible. So the more that, and the reason that we want people to kind of join up is just to try and make sure that money is helping to build where people are doing advice projects, and there's lots of other things that you could be bidding for other than energy advice as well. But where people are doing advice projects, the more that we can kind of enhance the provision of energy advice across Great Britain overall, the better. So kind of bear that in mind, the more that you can fit around other things that are going on. And on eco, I guess again, just to sort of clarify a little bit, because I know that this is kind of a little bit of a grey area for people because of the rule about energy companies. Basically, the thing to look for is, are we paying for anything that you could argue an energy company should be paying for? So we absolutely want you to be referring people into the grant schemes that they qualify for. But I guess always kind of try and apply that little test of is this something that actually the the company that's doing eco should be paying for. Is it kind of offsetting their costs, and that's what we want to avoid. Okay, so going into the questions, we've had one about whether the scheme can fund an exemplar project on an individual building, a community building. So this is a tricky one, I guess. Again, because the redress funding, we want the redress funding to go as far as it possibly can, have as much impact as it possibly can. If you are doing a project in just one building, then you'll need to show that that's going to have impact beyond that building. So if you were doing something that's an exemplar project in an individual building, think about how can this have impact beyond that one building. Is it something that's replicable elsewhere? Are there lots of other buildings that are kind of like this one? And how are we going to make sure that it is replicated? How are we going to communicate and all of that kind of stuff? So generally, you know, it's going to be very difficult to get a project funded if it's just having an impact in one building. But if you can really show that, you know, this is something that is applicable elsewhere and can have a real impact, then, you know, that might be relevant. Okay, so there was a question about feedback. I think Graham in his presentation pointed to the feedback document. So the way that we're doing feedback is producing this kind of one document that has feedback based on what we've seen in all the applications. So we would encourage everyone to have a look at that and you know, think through, is there any of this that might apply to my project, and have a look at that. The other thing that we do, you know, if you want to email the redress email for specific feedback, then we're happy to provide that. So if you've got specific questions as well, then do, and we're happy to field that. And we do get quite a lot of kind of similar projects through. I guess the question was, yes, we are happy for people to reapply. If you read some feedback and you want to amend your project and reapply, that's fine. And yeah, if you want to ask for bespoke feedback, then by all means do. And I guess the one thing that we would discourage people from doing is just resubmitting exactly the same project that wasn't successful. Do try and look at the feedback and try and amend it, because it will just, it will improve your chances of being funded. Yes, so there was a question, yes, an extra question on eco, understandably. Yes, we do understand the difficulty of that. I think that's one area where you can ask a question of us. So if you're developing a project and you're thinking, okay, well, yeah, here's how we are going to address that, then you can again drop us an email on that, or we can have a conversation on the phone and talk through. Because I think the key thing is, I guess the sort of an area where this is particularly difficult is around referrals into eco. And what we want to avoid is where, if there is a scheme that is just doing a whole load of referrals into a specific energy company's eco, there's quite a strong argument there to say, well, actually redress is just offsetting the marketing costs of an energy company. But obviously the last thing we want is for people advisors to be going into the homes of vulnerable people and not telling them about grants that they might be eligible for to improve the efficiency of their house and keep them warm. So I think it is just trying to think through how can you separate that out. So actually some of the successful projects had some quite interesting solutions on that. So kind of having a completely separate referral mechanism that's separately funded is one way of doing it, and then redress can fund the actual energy advice that happens. before they're then passed into the redress, into the eco referral scheme. So again, probably, you know, if you've got a very specific possible solution to that, then have a chat to us. It is difficult because the schemes are complicated, because they're very bespoke. You know, we have to treat it on a case-by-case basis, basically. I guess potentially, I think with a lot of those kinds of things, so with that kind of project and with projects where there's a kind of intervention that says we are going to give people money on their energy bills, the thing that we would encourage you to think about alongside that is how can we help those people long term? So is it possible that you could, you know, you're making that intervention to sort out the immediate financial problem, but you're also then doing something to, you know, sort out the fabric of the building, advise them and help them to understand that better. You know, even if it's working with another, if there's an existing service, then having a referral alongside that. So I think theoretically, yes, you could, yes, but I guess it's just try and think about how you can have excuse me, the maximum positive impact, and how you can make sure that is that has a long-term impact. So yes, the projects on the map are all previously funded projects. So they are the ones that have been successful. They're our actual redress grants. And the qualification that we, a question on what is the qualification that we expect from staff. So that I think is now in this, we've updated that in the scheme guidance, I think, which is the City and Guilds level 3 or equivalent, but do refer to the scheme guidance and the feedback on that as well. So it doesn't absolutely have to be that scheme, but that's to give people an idea of the level. You know, we want to make sure that anyone who's going out and advising is equipped to be able to deal with the kind of questions and the issues that they might face. Yeah, so we've had a couple of questions about community buildings, and again, I think, you know, the key thing with that, if it is just some energy measures in one building, then it might be a little bit of a struggle to get funded, just because of that. You know, how can you show the maximum benefit for the impact? So again, you know, if it's community building that is really widely used, and actually it's a great example of something that could be put in loads of other places, and you're going to do a program alongside it to explain it to people and get people in and give them energy advice, then those kinds of things, you know, that maybe you can see that might start to then have the sort of level of impact that might help. But I think particularly if it's, you know, if it's an upgrade for heating or something like that, then you might struggle to get that funded here, and it might be better to look at things like lottery, perhaps, for that. There's a question about scale. Yes, the scale of projects that we fund. We've funded quite a large range of projects. If you go into the website with the information about the previous funds, then you can see how much the different grants were. So we do, like the current program, because it's only a small budget, has this cap of 100k. But in previous rounds, we have funded projects that are over 200k. And I think with all of it, I guess, is just try and think about how much impact are you going to achieve for that money. So I guess what we're looking for in larger applications is the kind of, I guess, value for money in terms of, you know, is there a big extra additional impact? And that might be in terms of, you know, number of people reached, amount of reductions in fuel bills, or all of those kinds of things. But also in some cases, it might be that it's going to achieve a change that is going to enable a load of other things to happen. So, you know, it's piloting something that actually could make a real difference to a huge number of buildings, organizations, people. So I guess our panel do look at, you know, if it's a larger grant, is it delivering that kind of extra impact that we want to see? Okay, we're running a bit short on time, but I'll try and get through another couple. Okay, there is a question about procurement policy that might be needed, which looks like quite a specific one. It might be better if we talk direct to you on that one. Procurement in relation to doing a kind of savings grant and loan scheme. It sounds like it might be good for us to talk to you on that. I mean, have a look at the procurement. There is a procurement section within the guidance. But if you have specific questions on that, it might be worth asking. I guess really we're just keen that any procurement that gets done under this is fair and open and is, you know, going to get you good value for the money. Question about the innovation section on energy advice. So it is not crucial that every redress project is innovative. We are happy funding things that are just bread and butter, are going to deliver good outcomes. Innovation, I guess the innovation section is just an opportunity for you to highlight anything you're doing that's a bit different, a bit new, and get some extra points for it. So if it's not a kind of gateway criteria, you don't have to score really highly there, as long as you are targeting the core priority of vulnerable energy consumers. If you're doing a project that is specifically about innovation and is not only targeting, so it is possible to bid for a project that doesn't only target vulnerable customers, but you would need to do that specifically in the innovation section, in which case that's the area you really you need to focus on that, and it has to be an innovation project that's going to benefit energy consumers as a whole if you're not specifically targeting vulnerable customers. But the vast majority of projects we expect to be targeting vulnerable customers, because we can only spend a small amount, up to, I think it's up to 15% of the overall on innovation projects. So I guess, you know, it's just an opportunity there for you to highlight anything a bit new and different that you're doing. You don't have to be incredibly innovative to get funded by Redress.